You know that feeling, don't you? That subtle shift in the air when a truth is almost ready to break free, but it's still caught, just beneath the surface of everyday life. It's a tremor, a faint hum that whispers, something isn't right. For Ethan Thorne, a man who had always prided himself on the rock-solid foundation of his family, that tremor began not with a dramatic reveal, but with a whisper, a fleeting glance, a silent pause that spoke volumes more than any shouted confession. Ethan, now 38, with the easy laugh of a man content in his skin and the strong, calloused hands of a carpenter, had always believed in the simple, unwavering narrative of his life. He was the beloved only son of Eleanor and Robert Thorne, pillars of their small, idyllic New England town. Their home, a charming colonial nestled among ancient oak trees, was a sanctuary of warmth and tradition. Family dinners were a ritual, filled with stories of his parents' enduring love, their struggles, their triumphs, and always the story of how much they had wanted him, their miracle baby. Ethan's childhood was a tapestry woven with threads of unwavering affection. His mother, Eleanor, with her silver hair always neatly pinned and her kind, discerning eyes, was the epitome of maternal grace. She had a way of looking at him, a deep, knowing gaze that conveyed an ocean of love without a single word. Robert, his father, a stoic man with a hearty laugh and a penchant for classic cars, had taught him everything from fixing an engine to the value of a firm handshake. They were, in every sense, his parents, his entire world. And yet, this subtle, unsettling hum had begun. It wasn't a sudden revelation, but rather a slow, creeping doubt, like a shadow lengthening imperceptibly across a sun-drenched lawn. It started with trivial things almost too small to register. A forgotten birth certificate tucked away in an old photo album, its crisp corners strangely uncreased for something so supposedly old. A fleeting moment when he overheard his mother on the phone, her voice hushed, almost conspiratorial, uttering a name he didn't recognize, followed by a quick, nervous glance in his direction when she realized he was nearby. Then there was the peculiar absence of baby pictures. Not entirely absent, of course, but strikingly few compared to those of his cousins, whose early years were meticulously documented in thick, bulging albums. When he'd asked about it as a child, Eleanor would smile wistfully and say, "Oh, we were just so busy loving you. Sweetheart, we forgot to take pictures." It was a sweet, plausible excuse, and he'd accepted it without question. But now, as an adult, the excuse felt a little thin, like a worn-out fabric barely concealing a void. The unease deepened during his annual physical. Dr. Aris, a family friend who had seen Ethan since he was a boy, mentioned a rare blood type. AB negative, if I recall correctly. Ethan, he'd said casually, quite uncommon. Ethan hadn't thought much of it then, but a few weeks later, while helping his parents clear out the attic, he stumbled upon an old medical record from his mother's distant cousin, a woman who had passed away years ago. Curiosity piqued, he skimmed through it, and there it was, glaring up at him from a faded page. O positive. Robert's blood type, he knew from a recent hospital visit, was also O positive. A minor detail, perhaps, but it gnawed at him. A tiny, almost imperceptible crack in the perfect facade of his life. He tried to dismiss it, to rationalize. Perhaps the doctor was mistaken. Perhaps his parents were a rare genetic anomaly. But the hum persisted, growing louder, more insistent. He started watching his parents more closely, observing their interactions with a new, almost clinical eye. He noticed the subtle flinches, the quick changes in topic whenever anything remotely related to his birth or early infancy came up. He saw the way their eyes would meet, a silent, almost imperceptible communication passing between them, a shared secret held tightly under lock and key. It wasn't just them, either. His Aunt Carol, a vivacious woman with a penchant for gossip, would become oddly subdued whenever the topic of Ethan's earliest memories arose. His Uncle David, usually boisterous and open, would shift uncomfortably, clearing his throat and finding sudden interest in the patterns on the wallpaper. It was as if an invisible curtain would descend, separating him from a part of their collective history. The feeling of being an outsider, even within his own family, was a chilling one. It wasn't overt hostility, but a subtle, pervasive sense of being other. He began to delve into old family photographs with a renewed intensity, searching for clues, for anomalies. He noticed how, in pictures from his infancy, his parents held him with an almost hesitant tenderness, a fraction of a second slower to embrace him than they were with other family children. He dismissed it as paranoia, the product of an overactive imagination. But the seeds of doubt, once sown, were beginning to sprout, their roots digging deep into the fertile ground of his subconscious. The perfect picture of his life, framed by loving parents and a serene childhood, was starting to warp, its edges blurring, its colors fading under the harsh glare of an unspoken truth. He felt a growing sense of urgency, a desperate need to uncover what lay beneath the carefully constructed layers of his family's narrative. The hum had become a thrum, a persistent vibration in his very bones. Something was profoundly, terrifyingly wrong. He was standing on the precipice of a revelation, and the ground beneath him felt ready to give way. The loving smiles, the shared laughter, the comforting routines, all of it now felt like a meticulously crafted illusion. And the most terrifying part? He knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the core, that his entire family, every single one of them, was involved. They had been lying to him for 38 years. And the question that hammered against his skull, demanding an answer, was why? The why became an obsession, a relentless current pulling Ethan deeper into a sea of unanswered questions. He began his quiet investigation, a clandestine operation within the very home that had always felt like his sanctuary. He scoured old documents, searched through boxes of forgotten keepsakes, his heart hammering with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. His parents, oblivious to his burgeoning suspicion, continued their lives, their gentle smiles and reassuring gestures now feeling like a cruel mockery. The more he observed, the more the pieces, once scattered and seemingly insignificant, began to coalesce into a disturbing mosaic. He found a faded, unmarked photograph tucked away in a seldom-used drawer in his mother's antique desk. It was a picture of a young woman, perhaps in her late teens or early 20s, with a striking cascade of fiery red hair and eyes that held a peculiar mix of defiance and vulnerability. She wasn't family. He'd never seen her before, and yet, there was something in her gaze, a fleeting resemblance that sent a shiver down his spine. He showed the photo to his Aunt Carol, feigning casual interest, asking if she recognized the woman. Her usually effusive demeanor instantly stiffened. Her eyes darted to Eleanor, who was across the room, before she mumbled something about an old acquaintance, dear long gone. The hurried deflection, the quick glance. It was all the confirmation Ethan needed. This woman was a key. His search intensified, becoming a clandestine hunt for any scrap of information, any crumb that would lead him closer to the truth. He started cross-referencing dates, looking for anomalies in the family calendar around the time of his birth. His parents had always celebrated his birthday with joyous extravagance. Yet he noticed that the official date on his birth certificate, the crisp, uncreased document he'd found earlier, was slightly different from the date they celebrated. A minor discrepancy, perhaps, but coupled with everything else, it screamed a silent warning. The most unsettling discovery came when he gained access to his father's old study, a room usually off-limits. Tucked away beneath a stack of dusty law journals, he found a small, worn, leather-bound diary. It wasn't his father's. The handwriting was delicate, flowing, distinctly feminine. He recognized it instantly as his mother's. Eleanor had never been one for journaling, at least not that he knew of. His fingers trembled as he opened it, a sense of profound trepidation washing over him. The entries were sporadic at first, mundane observations of daily life. Then they shifted, becoming more personal, more emotionally charged. He read about the struggle, the secret burden, and then a name that resonated with the image of the woman in the faded photograph. Amelia. The entries about Amelia were heartbreaking. They spoke of a young woman in dire circumstances, a quiet desperation, and then, with chilling clarity, of a decision. a sacrifice made for the greater good, for a chance at a better life. The diary didn't explicitly state what that sacrifice was, but the context, the dates, the creeping dread in Ethan's gut, all pointed to one horrific conclusion: his birth. The revelation hit him like a physical blow. He wasn't Eleanor and Robert's biological son. He was Amelia's. The greater good must have been his own future, a life free from whatever dire circumstances Amelia faced. His parents had adopted him, but not just adopted him. They had woven such an intricate web of deceit that it had become his entire reality. The beautiful lie, the one he had lived for nearly 4 decades, crumbled around him, leaving him adrift in a vast, cold ocean of betrayal. He felt a profound sense of emptiness, a void where his identity used to be. Who was he, if not the son of Eleanor and Robert Thorne? And who was Amelia? Was she still alive? Did she ever think of him? The questions gnawed at him, a relentless swarm of painful insects. He couldn't confront his parents, not yet. He needed more. He needed to understand the full scope of the deception, the depth of their complicity. He went back to the old photo album, the one with the suspiciously uncreased birth certificate. He noticed now, with a new, horrifying clarity, that the pictures of him as a baby were often blurry, taken from a distance or cropped in strange ways. It was as if they were trying to obscure something, to prevent scrutiny. He remembered his mother's wistful excuse about being too busy loving him. It wasn't love that had made them forget the camera. It was a deliberate act of concealment. His research led him down unexpected paths. He learned about underground networks that facilitated adoptions in a less regulated era, about families desperate for children and young mothers in impossible situations. He found mentions of a specific, discreet agency that had operated in a nearby city during the time of his birth, an agency that specialized in private arrangements. He also delved into public records, searching for anyone named Amelia who might have connections to the area, around his birth year, and with the telltale fiery red hair. The task was daunting, like searching for a single grain of sand on an endless beach. But the need to know, to find his true origins, fueled him. He felt a growing sense of urgency, a desperate need to find Amelia, to look into her eyes and understand the story that had been hidden from him for so long. The betrayal was crushing, but underneath it, a different emotion was stirring. A profound empathy for the young woman who had, for reasons he could only guess at, given him away. He imagined her struggles, her heartbreak, the impossible choice she must have faced. His anger at his adoptive parents was tempered by a burgeoning sense of compassion for his biological mother. The silence in the Thorne household, once comforting, now felt oppressive, thick with unspoken secrets. Every shared meal, every loving gesture, every memory felt tainted. He looked at Eleanor, her face etched with the lines of age and kindness, and saw not just his mother, but a master orchestrator of a lifelong deception. He looked at Robert, his strong, reliable father, and saw a man complicit in a lie that had defined his entire existence. The weight of this knowledge was almost unbearable. He was living a carefully constructed lie, and the architects of that lie were the two people he had loved and trusted more than anyone in the world. The echoes of Amelia's name, whispered from the pages of a hidden diary, reverberated through his mind, a constant reminder of the truth he now carried. He knew he couldn't live with this secret much longer. The confrontation was inevitable, a storm gathering on the horizon. But first he had to find Amelia. He had to piece together the rest of the story, not just for himself, but for the ghost of the young woman whose sacrifice had given him a life he now realized was built on a foundation of sand. The hum of unease had become a roaring torrent, threatening to engulf everything he had ever known. The torrent of Ethan's discovery consumed him. He found himself driven by an instinct so primal, so profound, it superseded everything he had once believed about himself. The trail for Amelia was colder than he'd anticipated. The discreet agency he found mentions of had closed decades ago, leaving behind minimal digital footprints. Public records searches yielded dozens of Amelias, but none that definitively matched the sparse clues he possessed. Yet, the image of the red-haired woman from the faded photograph, The name whispered in his mother's diary propelled him forward. He began visiting local libraries, poring over old newspaper archives, searching for any news that might have alluded to a young woman, a difficult birth, or a private adoption in their small town or surrounding areas. It was a tedious, often frustrating process, but with each passing day, the urgency within him grew. He felt a profound sense of connection to this unknown woman, a yearning to understand the circumstances that had led to his separation from her. The breakthrough came unexpectedly, not through a grand revelation, but through a forgotten detail. While sifting through an old community newsletter from the year of his birth, he stumbled upon a small obituary notice for a Martha Finch, a reclusive woman known for her work as a midwife in a neighboring, even smaller village. What caught his eye was a brief, almost dismissive line about private arrangements and discreet services she had provided. It was a long shot, but something in the phrasing, echoing the notes in his mother's diary and the agency he'd researched, snagged his attention. He drove to the quaint, forgotten village, a place time seemed to have overlooked. He asked around gently, discreetly about Martha Finch. Most people remembered her as an eccentric, a woman who kept to herself. But one elderly woman, a retired postmistress named Agnes, with eyes like faded sapphires, remembered more. Agnes spoke of Martha's reputation for helping young women in delicate situations, for facilitating quiet departures and quiet arrivals. And then, almost as an afterthought, Agnes mentioned a girl. Poor thing, she was barely out of her teens, Agnes recalled, her voice raspy with age. Came from a good family, but they cast her out. Had a baby little boy with hair like fire, just like his mama. Martha helped her. Gave the baby to a couple from out of town. The Thornes, I think. Nice folks. Seemed to want that baby something fierce. A cold dread mixed with a burning surge of hope washed over Ethan. Hair like fire. Just like the woman in the photograph. Just like the woman his mother called Amelia in her diary. And the Thornes. It all clicked into place, a horrifying, yet undeniable confirmation. The truth, long suppressed, was now glaring at him with an unbearable intensity. He felt a profound disorientation, as if the ground beneath him had dissolved. The Thornes, his parents, had not merely adopted him. They had taken him from a young, desperate mother, likely ostracized and alone. The sacrifice Eleanor had written about in her diary was Amelia's painful relinquishment of her own child. He returned home, the revelation burning like a brand in his chest. He couldn't hold it in any longer. That evening at the dinner table, the familiar scent of Eleanor's roasted chicken filling the air, he looked at his parents, their faces bathed in the warm glow of the chandelier, and saw them not as his protectors, but as his deceivers. He placed the faded photograph of Amelia on the table, face down, like a card waiting to be played. "I know," he said, his voice surprisingly steady despite the tempest raging within him. "I know about Amelia. I know about the lie." The silence that followed was deafening, heavy with unacknowledged years of deception. Eleanor's hand, reaching for a serving spoon, froze mid-air. Robert's face, usually so composed, paled, his eyes widening in a mixture of shock and resignation. Slowly, Eleanor reached for the photograph, her trembling fingers turning it over, her eyes, usually so kind, filled with tears. Robert cleared his throat, a sound of profound discomfort. "Ethan," he began, his voice hoarse. "We can explain." "Explain what?" Ethan retorted, his voice rising, the dam finally breaking. "Explain why you let me live a lie for 38 years? Why you let me believe I was your biological son when my real mother was out there somewhere, suffering, probably wondering about me." What followed was a heartbreaking, agonizing confession. Eleanor and Robert, in a torrent of guilt and grief, recounted the story. They had desperately wanted a child, struggling with infertility for years. They had met Martha Finch through a discreet connection, just as Amelia, a spirited young woman from a conservative, wealthy family, found herself pregnant and utterly alone. Her family, shamed and unforgiving, had disowned her. Martha, a kind but pragmatic woman, saw an opportunity for both parties. Eleanor described meeting Amelia, a young woman with a fierce spirit and a broken heart, who, in her desperation, made the agonizing decision to give up her son, believing it was the only way he could have a life free from stigma and hardship. Eleanor and Robert, consumed by their desire for a child, had agreed to the terms: complete secrecy, a fresh start, and the promise to raise him as their own, never revealing the truth. They had loved him fiercely, unequivocally. The lie, they insisted, had been born of love, a desire to protect him from a painful truth, to give him a normal life. But for Ethan, it was a normal life built on quicksand. The truth, though shattering, brought with it a strange sense of liberation. The pieces of his life, once disjointed and confusing, now fit into a coherent, albeit painful, narrative. He understood the fleeting glances, the hushed conversations, the peculiar silences. He understood the blood type, the missing baby pictures, the slight discrepancy in his birthday. All of it was a testament to the meticulous, agonizing effort his family had made to preserve their secret. As their story unfolded, tears streamed down Eleanor's face, her voice cracking with the weight of her confession. Robert, usually so strong, sat slumped, his shoulders bowed under the burden of their shared deception. Ethan saw their pain, their genuine remorse, and a complicated mix of anger, betrayal, and a nascent understanding welled within him. He was a product of a desperate arrangement, a secret born of heartbreak and hope. And now, the truth, raw and unvarnished, was laid bare. The storm had broken, and in its wake lay the fragments of a life he thought he knew, and the overwhelming, undeniable urge to find the woman whose sacrifice had shaped his very existence. Amelia. The aftermath of the confession was a profound silence, heavier than any Ethan had ever experienced. The air in the dining room, once filled with the warmth of a shared meal, now crackled with unspoken grief and shattered trust. Eleanor and Robert sat before him, two figures diminished by their unveiled deception, their faces etched with a sorrow that mirrored his own. For days, the house remained cloaked in this oppressive quiet. Ethan moved through it like a ghost, the echoes of their confession reverberating in his mind. The anger was still there, a hot, persistent ember, but it was now interwoven with a thread of bewildered compassion. He saw their desperation, their love, twisted into a complex knot of secrecy and good intentions gone terribly awry. He knew, instinctively, that their lie, however devastating, had been born from a place of profound desire and fear. Fear of losing him, fear of a truth that might shatter their carefully constructed family unit. But understanding didn't erase the pain. The identity he had held so dear, the narrative of his life, had been ripped away. He was not just their son. He was also Amelia's. The realization propelled him back to his search for her with renewed vigor. He now had more pieces: Martha Finch's name, the specific time frame, the description of fiery red hair. He broadened his search, looking for Amelia, or even Martha's other contacts, in communities surrounding the one Agnes had mentioned. He spent countless hours in libraries, poring over microfiche, making phone calls to historical societies and old-age homes. The trail was still faint, but he now had a name to whisper into the silence of his past, a face to search for in the blurred memories of his earliest days. And then, a breakthrough not from the dusty archives, but from a chance encounter. He visited a small historical society in Martha Finch's old village, hoping to find any records of her private arrangements. The curator, a spry woman named Mrs. Gable, with sharp, intelligent eyes, listened patiently to his vague inquiries. As he described the red-haired woman, a flicker of recognition crossed Mrs. Gable's face. "Amelia Vance," she said slowly, her voice soft. "She moved away many years ago. Went west, I heard. California, perhaps. Amelia Vance." The name resonated deep within him. A chord finally struck. With the full name, the search became exponentially more focused. He delved into online public records, social media, and ancestry websites, filtering by age, last known locations, and the name Vance. The process was painstaking, filled with dead ends and false leads. But then, on a smaller local news archive from a town in Northern California, he found it. A short article about a community leader, a passionate advocate for women's rights, celebrating her 70th birthday. Her name, Amelia Vance. The accompanying picture showed a woman with strikingly vibrant, though now silver, red hair, and eyes that held the same unique blend of defiance and vulnerability from the faded photograph. It was her. His heart pounded with a mixture of overwhelming excitement and profound trepidation. After nearly 4 decades, the woman who had given him life, the ghost of his past, was real, alive, and thriving thousands of miles away. He sent her a letter, a long, heartfelt missive, explaining everything. He included the faded photograph, a copy of the pertinent diary entries, with his adoptive parents' names redacted, and a recent picture of himself. He held his breath for days, weeks, the anticipation a constant knot in his stomach. Then, a reply. A thin, elegant envelope, postmarked from California. His hands trembled as he opened it. Inside, a letter written in a graceful, slightly shaky hand. Amelia's words poured out, a torrent of raw emotion. She confirmed everything his parents had confessed, but added layers of her own agonizing story. The shame, the family's harsh rejection, the impossible choice, and the years of wondering, of imagining the life of the son she had never forgotten. She expressed profound regret, not for giving him away, but for the circumstances that forced her hand. She also expressed a deep, abiding love, a maternal bond that time and distance could not sever. She wanted to meet him. The first meeting was a blur of tears and unspoken emotions. In a quiet cafe in Northern California, Ethan finally looked into the eyes of his biological mother. Amelia, now 70, radiated a quiet strength, her silver hair still holding the fiery spirit of her youth. There were no grand pronouncements, just a silent acknowledgement, a shared history unfolding between them. They talked for hours, days, weeks, piecing together the broken fragments of their lives. He learned about her struggles, her triumphs, her life dedicated to helping others avoid the very fate she had endured. He saw the scars of her past, but also the incredible resilience that had shaped her into the remarkable woman she was. The encounter was not a replacement for his adoptive parents, but an expansion of his identity, a deeper understanding of who he was and where he came from. He began to rebuild his relationship with Eleanor and Robert, a slow, arduous process. The trust was fractured, but their love for him was undeniable, and his understanding of their intentions, however misguided, allowed for a tentative path toward healing. It wasn't forgiveness in the traditional sense, but a complex, nuanced acceptance. This journey, this shocking unveiling of a lifelong lie, had been a devastating ordeal. But through it, Ethan found not just a biological mother, but a richer, more complex understanding of family, of love, of sacrifice, and of the tangled threads that weave together a human life. It was a story of betrayal, yes, but also of incredible resilience, of hidden loves, and of the enduring power of truth, no matter how painful its revelation. And now, as this incredible chapter closes, I want to ask you, what are your thoughts? Have you ever had a secret that changed everything? Or witnessed a truth that reshaped your world? Share your stories in the comments below. And if this journey, this incredible unveiling, has resonated with you, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to our channel for more untold stories, and hit that notification bell so you never miss another profound revelation. Your support helps us bring these powerful narratives to life. Thank you for joining me on this extraordinary journey.